Hi, I'm Jin Yu Kim. I'm a Korean presenting person with bangs, long hair because of COVID. I'm wearing a mustard colored dress, and my background is the poster of Manzanar Diverted When Water Becomes Dust. I'm calling in from the unceded territories of Tongva and Chumash, and also known as Los Angeles. And I'm also an AWC alum, class of 2007. I directed a short film there called Bearing Dreams, which is about the prophetic dreams that Korean pregnant women have that determines their future and gender and like their role in society. And what else? Right now I am producing Manzanar Diverted When Water Becomes Dust, which is a documentary feature which is premiering at the Big Sky Film Festival on February 26th. And I will let Anne describe what that is.
Hi, my name is Anne Kaneko. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm also calling in from Tongva Chumash lands. In terms of what I'm wearing a huipil or a blouse from Oaxaca. So it's very colorful, hand embroidered. I'm in my bedroom with an orange wall in the background. This is where I've done all of my Zoom calls in the last year. And I'm the director producer of Manzanar Diverted When Water Becomes Dust. I'm also the artist mentor for the Armed with the Camera program. I've been the artist mentor since Jin's class, which was my first class. So we have a long relationship. Manzanar Diverted When Water Becomes Dust is about 3 communities coming together to fight for land and water. It's a retelling of the Los Angeles water story, and looks at Payuhunadu, or the Owens Valley. These 3 communities are the Native Americans, the Japanese Americans who were incarcerated there during World War II, and the rancher environmentalist community who also continue to live there.
Awesome. It's so good to see you today, Anne.
Always a pleasure. It's actually great to actually see you. I talk to you all the time on the phone, but anyway.
Well, let's get right into questions. So I'm going to shoot you the first question. When did you know that you wanted to be a filmmaker?
Oh my gosh. I think it's still evolving question.
You're like, do I still want to do this?
Am I really a filmmaker? I don't know. Do I want to claim this like crazy identity? I started out as a still photographer. I was making photographs in college. I was doing black and white photography, and I spent a lot of time in the darkroom, which was a very lovely, induced, very smelly, kind of makes you high, kind of a place, sort of meditative. So I loved it, and sort of watching the magic of seeing images floating out of the chemicals was always like it was magic. And so I loved making photographs. But for some reason, I was like, oh my God, I feel so alone in this process. I really want to be doing something that's more collaborative. And something, I don't know, I was feeling like photography was really expensive, but I don't know what I was thinking, because now I've become a filmmaker, which is clearly way, way more expensive and way, way more ambitious, but whatever. I always am up for a challenge, right? So, but yeah, I think I was making photographs. I was working in medium format, large format, and then when I was living in Japan, I kind of was thinking, oh, I may be interested in film, and I started working as a production coordinator on some films in Japan. And it's essentially because I was bilingual in Japanese and English that it afforded me these really amazing opportunities. And so I was a production coordinator for Black Rain, that Ridley Scott film, and then also Wim Wenders film, Until the End of the World. So And then I went to grad school. So then I became a filmmaker, still like questioning, what I was doing, but that goes on. That's an existential crisis that goes on for your whole lifetime. So whatever.
Yep. Agreed.
I think, yeah, you can relate. I'm just curious for you, what's your favorite part of filmmaking?
Um, I can't pick. I love all stages of filmmaking, but I think the place where I find myself the most in is ideation. I have a book that I have like all these ideas about the kinds of films I want to make, and it just keeps growing and growing, and I haven't done any of them. Well, maybe one of them, but it's a place where I find myself daydreaming and then just like creating these kinds of stories in my head. And I've also thought I am a filmmaker, but I think that first and foremost, I'm a storyteller. That's how I got into filmmaking, is like I just love telling stories. So I'm also like, while I am also like a filmmaker, I want to try to expand different formats where I feel like I can tell a story. So whether it's like guesting on a podcast or writing or just journaling for myself. But yeah, so I think that I love ideation. And then of course, like once you get into filmmaking, production's always really fun. But like ironically, I haven't been on set for a really long time. I
Mhm.
mean, even pre-COVID, I feel like most of my work has been behind a computer. And I think I'm okay with that. Like I think when I was younger, I really wanted to be like up and running and going to all these different places and traveling and talking to people, and I love getting like a high off of that. But I'm also like kind of growing into this kind of desk jobby version of it, where I think it's just like life changes, you have a kid, like there's a lot of things going on. It still makes me feel connected to the story, but I don't have to like, you know, just like up and leave. So I think, which is really funny because I think people who knew me from like the college days, they're like, no, I thought you liked filmmaking because you liked escaping and up and leaving everywhere. And that was like the initial draw, but I think now I just like the storytelling aspect of it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Well, I think what's been so great about working with you is that you are such a, you have ideas. You're a filmmaker unto yourself. So it's like been a very creative process working together. And it's sort of like, and all the different stages of filmmaking. So anyway.
Yeah, that's true. And even like with impact producing, I feel like people think impact producing is just like, oh, you're just like plugging things in. But it's like, it could be really creative, you know, like you can think of all these ideas. It's almost like event planning, which is like really fun for me. So, yeah, I think that there's all these little things where you can have like the most, you know, whatever job, but if you find an angle where you feel like you can tell a story, then, you know, you can make it what it is.
Stories, ideas. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Okay, so I have another question for you. What were you like as a kid? Were you like your daughter?
I was not like my daughter. Um, I was a pretty shy kid. I was the youngest, or I am the youngest of four kids. And so I think I was always in the shadow of my older siblings and my cousins who were also very close to us. So that was like five other people who were really much older than me, because there's a 7-year gap between myself and my next sibling. And yeah, I felt like I was kind of in their shadow. So I was kind of a shy kid. And then also just in school, I was like the good student who never said very much, kind of a wallflower, really. And then like, I feel like there's still the part of me who's skeptical and a little pessimistic. And so I feel like in college people thought of, or not, maybe not college, but grad school, like people, I have a friend who said that I was like Eeyore, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to be Eeyore, that's the worst. And she's like, oh no, Anne, it's okay, Eeyore's the smartest one. And
A
I'm like,
realist.
yeah, whatever. I want to be more like, I want to embody Tigger's energy. I want to be more like, go with the flow, like Winnie the Pooh, not Eeyore. So there's part of me is just like, okay, I've got to remake myself from that Eeyore side of me So I feel like we all kind of change and evolve. But yeah, I'm so, and so I feel like, you know, I was probably a little depressive, you know, and I've sort of had to learn to let go of some of that. I don't know. So I feel grateful that my daughter is not that way. She's very outgoing, super like engaged and enthusiastic, which I don't remember myself being that way. But who knows? Maybe from the outside, it seemed like I was that way. I don't really know. Who knows? You know, it's sort of like you realize, oh, it's all very subjective. Your memory of yourself. Maybe you can tell me. I don't know. I just remember these stories from grad school. It's like, oh my God, Anne, you were such a downer. So and now I feel like, oh, I don't want to be that person at all. I don't want that energy at all. In my classes, it's like, okay, we're going to have a great time. This is going to be good. We're going to go make films. That's like the energy I want to embody now, not like Eeyore. So anyway.
Wow.
um, so tell me about yourself. How were you as a kid?
I was Winnie the Pooh, actually. I going with this like Winnie the Pooh metaphor. My nickname was Winnie the Pooh
Oh,
or like
wow.
Pooh Bear for a really long time. Now I feel like I'm kind of dressed like Pooh Bear today. I used to collect a lot of like Winnie the Pooh stuffed animals. And I used to think like, why is everyone calling me Pooh Bear? Is it because I'm chubby and yellow?
This is even in Bolivia, they were calling you Winnie the Pooh?
Actually, in Bolivia, they were calling me Pikachu.
Oh no.
Which is like the same, like, ball of energy, like rotund yellow character. And I was like, and then I kind of like, just embraced it because, well, someone did tell me that was the reason why they were calling me that. At first, I thought it was because I was cute. And then my classmate, who was like too honest, told me it was because I was chubby and yellow. I was like, wow, okay. Um, but that said, I think that I didn't come into my energetic, positive kind of identity until middle school. I didn't talk from first grade until fifth grade. So my entire elementary school, like everyone thought I was like mute or something. Like they would ask me a question and I would shrug or like, nod my head, yes or no. Um, when the teacher called on me, like that was the only time I ever spoke. So, people were always like, I want to hear Jin's voice. I want to know what it sounds like, and I I just like I was so shy because I felt, like English was my third language and I just was so ashamed of my weird accent. Like my accent didn't sound Korean. It was like a mixed match of Korean and like Bolivian, like Spanish accent basically, or Castilian. And so I just was really just ashamed of it. It was like double shame. And so for like the 5 years in elementary school, I was just like hungrily eating up pop culture. Like I was watching like Saved by the Bell every day. Like I was just like watching TV from the moment I got home until I went to sleep. I even watched like Nick at Night, like all these old timey stuff, just to kind of like get into the American culture. So I just felt like I was trying to become American really fast because I didn't want to feel so foreign. And then once junior high started, I went to a junior high that had like none of my elementary school people, like maybe 3 or 4. So I was like, oh my God, it's my chance to like rebrand myself. This is like pre-Instagram, all of that. So I'm like, I get like a totally clean slate. I'm going to be like the fun, extroverted person. Cause I felt like that was like what I was inside. So when junior high started, I was just like, blah, blah, blah. Like I started getting notices from school, like from teachers who are like, Jin needs to stop talking so much in school, which to me was like a victory, right? I was like, I went from like this shy kid to like someone who can't shut up. So I think that it's just like interesting because when I think back at those like first to fifth grade, I'm like, that was a very traumatic experience every day going to school as if I was a new kid. And I recently just talked about that with a friend, and I was like, yeah, just imagine your first day at school in a totally different country where you don't know the language and you had to repeat that same day for 5 years. Like, that's kind of how I felt. But yeah, what was the question? Oh, but I started in high school, I started really getting into languages, and I think that's probably because I was trilingual, and I just felt like the more I knew different languages, I just felt like that was like my way into storytelling, and also just like understanding cultures, like different languages. So I wish I had like a cool answer to like, what's your favorite high school subject, like art or like studio art or whatever, but I used all my electives for language courses and sports. So that's what it is.
That's great. So yeah, that's so funny. I mean, I guess for, you know, speaking of storytelling, it's like I also feel like because I read so much, I was a total bookworm. So yeah, I was kind of introverted in that way. So, but yeah, it never occurred to me like, oh, I could sort of manifest this on the outside. But anyway.
What, when we first met in AWC class of 2007, you were my mentor. What was your first impression of me? You can be honest. I'm not that person anymore.
Oh my God. I was like, I was like, so she's like, oh, Jen is so smart, but she's all over the place.
Yep,
It
I
was like,
remember that.
I was like, is she going to come to the meeting this week or not? I don't know. I mean, and it's just like you were downtown working with your, you know, your mom's like factory, and then you're like taking care of your brother. And it was just like you're trying to, I don't know. It was like you were taking some other classes at UCLA. It felt like it was just like you were all over the place. I was like, okay, I don't know where she's at, but she'll pull it together, I guess. We haven't seen her in a while, but that was kind of like, yeah, that was kind of my impression. I was like, oh, it's like, yeah, I mean, and it's so, it was like so interesting to me. I guess they say opposites attract, right? Because like Dave was always there, you know, always together presenting his stuff, and Jen would kind of blow it. You would just sort of blow in sometimes. So it was just like, oh my God, the evolution of things. It's so interesting. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. So Dave is my husband, who I met at the AWC class of 2007. And it was funny because like I was barely there. I was also making another film at the same time. So I was, yeah, I don't know. I was just like, I was winging it. I was winging everything. The only saving grace was like the AWC film that I was making was about my family, and I had access to them, so I knew when I could shoot with them. So it was like, okay, I can only do weekends with them, so like I'm already, I can do my weekdays on this other film, and then I was taking night classes and working full time. So I was just like all over the place. I was literally over the place. My first impression of you was I was like, Anne is very stern. I was like,
Oh, that's so
she's
funny.
very strict. Yeah, it's really funny.
Oh.
And yeah, I was like, Anne really likes Dave, but I don't think she likes me because Dave's always like early or on time, and and I'm never there.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's funny. That's so funny. Yeah, no, that was a long time ago.
Mhm.
I think I felt like this sort of kindred spirit, you know, there was this kinship with you, I guess, because
Yeah.
you had been that you were from Bolivia. I thought that was so
Yeah.
interesting. And so I was like, oh wow, somebody else who had ties to Latin America. So yeah, I was always very curious about that, but there was never the time to actually ask you about that. So
Oh. Yeah, no, I think we definitely bonded over that because of your time in Peru. I think that was definitely our connecting point.
yeah.
So I was like, oh, I think Anne does like me. um,
God, when did you figure out that I was not stern?
I don't know, maybe like
Oh,
towards the end.
oh my
But
God.
also I think it's because I didn't show up all the time. So I think my experience with it was closer to the end when, we were doing like rough cuts and stuff like that. But I also, I mean, like to me, that was such a formative class. It was the first time I met you. It's where I met my husband. We had a friend, Tam, who did pass away from there. And I see her legacy like to this day of just like, and I feel like really honored to have known her even for that short period of time, because I see so many people now who have been inspired by her for the last 10, 15 years. And they're out doing it, they're out making documentaries. They form like the Undocu Filmmakers collective. It's just like, it's so great how someone could touch like so many people with their work. And yeah, I mean, I think that there were other members like Mina San, who I became really close to as well, and Jenny and Nadine, and I haven't seen Ray since since AWC, I think. And yeah, it's such an interesting class. It was such a eclectic mix of different types of people. And like when I think on our orientation, I had a wisdom tooth pulled out, so I had this chipmunk cheek, and I was
I
so
remember
embarrassed.
that.
I was like so embarrassed. And then like we were going around like introducing ourselves, and then Dave was like, "Oh, I directed this feature documentary called Queen from Virginia." And I was like, "Why are you here? Like you've already emerged. Get out of here." This is for emerging filmmakers. And I remember feeling like, oh my God, is he going to be like an arrogant, person? But of course, he's like the total opposite. And I think like it's just interesting because like I just, was on this panel where they were talking about first impressions. And yeah, in 2007, like in AWC, like a lot of my first impressions of people were like dead wrong or like totally opposite, which is good. It's good news. You can change. People can change. People can change their minds about you. And is not stern. So
Oh my God. That is so funny. No, I'm so glad that you mentioned Tam because I feel like, that she kind of embodies the spirit of AWC for me in a way. And I realized, she had worked on this music video for me after AWC. And I don't know, I always feel like, oh, maybe there was something in that experience that really kind of pushed her because she had this, it was very unfortunate. She had this accident where she had to go to the hospital. So all of her issues about being undocumented came up. And then it was sort of like the money issue. And she's like, what can you do? Can you do? And I felt bad. It wasn't my production. I was the director of it. But I said, you know, you've got to advocate for yourself. And once you say it, then I can back you up. But I can't say this myself for you, right? That's just not, that's not as strong. And so she's like, okay. And so she advocated for herself. She got most of it paid for from the production. And, it was like a no budget kind of a situation. But I think it was just a very fearful experience for her. And then afterwards is when she testified in Congress, for DACA, for the DREAM Act. And so I don't know. I mean, I somehow feel like, oh, maybe that experience helped her to like find her voice. But she really touched me, and I show her films to my students later in terms of the power that media can have and how she how she really touched so many people, she and her colleague who passed away with her. So
yeah.
anyway, I really appreciate being a part of this community and being able to learn from everyone. So, I always feel like, oh, I'm the mentor, but really, I'm just kind of, I get to hang out with everybody. Hang out with some cool younger people who like are going to change the world. So. All right. So do you feel like you bring your heritage to your work? I don't know.
I do. I feel like it's more, yeah, I think Korean stuff I do a lot more. And I have more of a complicated relationship with my Bolivian identity, which is that I was born there and I grew up there until I was 5, and I went back for high school, but I never really felt like Bolivian enough. Like that didn't allow me to feel like that amount of time didn't allow me to feel Bolivian enough. And like I think that even telling stories about Bolivia, I think I have to be very careful for myself to like really tell it from my own lens and not like this is what Bolivians feel or like this is the Bolivian story, because I always felt like a little outside of that. So the Bolivian stories that I helped tell, like my brother's story of going back home. My brother was I think 16, probably the youngest, maybe, I don't know, don't quote me on it, but one of the youngest directors to screen his film at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival.
Wow.
But he directed a short where we went back to Bolivia and he was trying to reconnect with that side of his life, like just because he was away for so long. And through that project, because I shot it and edited it and produced it, it was a way for me to also like kind of ask those questions for myself. And ultimately I think like, yeah, my Bolivian projects are going to be very more specific and targeted in terms of like what, like how am I telling it through my lens. And I think for the Korean stuff it's a little bit more like Korean American angle. um so, and I am really interested in preserving as much of this Korean American heritage as possible, because what I've realized is that Korea has moved on. Like Korea is like a city of the future, and a lot of the things that I hold dear as part of like my cultural connection to the Korean culture, like Koreans don't even do anymore, or they think it's like cheesy or whatever. And I also realized like my parents are basically like living time capsules. Like their mentality and the way that they see the world and their culture and the ways that they do things and even the way that they talk is stuck in like 1978 Korea, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I've only really had that solidified as a true experience because my mom had this like Korean Airbnb where she registered her guest house for this Korean website where like Koreans come to LA, like usually for the first time on their honeymoons or whatever, and they stay at the guest house and we make food for them and we get to chat. And as I'm like chatting with them, I realize my mom has such a hard time chatting with these people because she's just as alienated from her own people as I always felt. But I always had this reason of like, well, I grew up here. I wasn't born in Korea. I've been to Korea like a handful of times. And I always saw my mom as like the pinnacle or the guru of like what a Korean cultured person is. And when I saw her like coming up against like true Koreans, I was like, oh my gosh, my mom is like also Korean American. She just has no idea.
Yeah.
She's just stuck in this time warp. And now I know what a time warp feels like because we're in COVID. And so I'm like, this must have been her entire immigrant experience, just like kind of like being in COVID. And we need more stories about it. Well, just kind of talking about history. And I mean, I think that our film, Man's Are Diverted, When Water Becomes Dust, is so rich in that history of like, not just like preserving things that we know have happened, but also like putting a spotlight on the shared histories, because I feel like a lot of times when we think about timeline of history, we're thinking very like linear, like this is what happened here, this is what happened here. But like the fact that they're on the same chronological timeline, but no one has pieced it together that like it's the same timeline, things were happening for different communities in this way. Um, do you want to talk a little bit more about like our film and like what you hope people will take away from watching it, and kind of like what made you want to do this?
Um, you know, it's been such a long process that it's kind of like, whoa, what is this thing? You know, it's been like 5, 6 years in the making. But I feel like the film is this attempt. I mean, I don't know, it's very ambitious. People always describe, oh, it's so ambitious, right? But I do feel like it's an attempt to kind of like step back and look at a really big history. I mean, and I feel like it's a history that sort of um, is this the story of the West. You know, we come here as immigrants, and so we have that experience of the West, but it's also the manifest destiny West, right? That West. And kind of how we figure into that in a bigger environmental way, and how it allows people to sort of step back and think about this big panorama of history and sort of how we figure into it now. And especially and from whatever position you come at it, in terms of, you know, as a urban person, or as a child of immigrants, or as someone who's indigenous, who's from that place, or people who have come, whose family has come to settle the West. It's like, how do we figure into this bigger history? And so hopefully maybe we can do something about it, right? That we can have this understandings that will move us to do something, and really be inspired by the beauty of the place where we live, right? Because I feel like we live, you know, California is an amazing place and has this amazing land. And, you know, how can we, you know, maintain that richness?
Yeah, and I also think like, when you first spoke about this film and you were talking about how you wanted it to be poetic and artistic, it's like for a very long time we were, it was mostly interview based, so it was hard to see that coming through, but I'm so proud of like what the film is, because I feel like it's perfectly the vision that you had the moment you thought about it. And it is hard to describe sometimes like how the film feels, but like just in terms of emotional connection to it, I feel like the great thing about this film is that sometimes when you're watching it, like you do get this very spiritual experience from it. It's a very meditative and poetic piece. And the other day I thought, wow, this almost kind of feels like it's from the point of view of Mother Earth, because there's almost this like there a lot of the shots of the land, it's like, and with the music it feels like the land is holding all of these stories, which it is, but it feels like you are the land. Like when you're watching it, it feels like immersive enough where you're like, oh my gosh, this must be how Mother Earth feels. And I really felt that when we were doing color correction and we're just like in this theater, and hopefully people can get some of
With
that
our
feeling when they're
masks
watching
on.
it. Yeah, but it felt like I hope that on like a visceral level, not just like talking about impact and what we want audiences to do right after they watch the film, but just the actual experience of the film, of watching it. I hope people feel like just that much more connected to our planet, and like understand how humankind's you know greed and desire of development have ruined it. I just want them to just take away that much, because once you have that much connection to wanting to do something about the land, that's prime time for us to be like, okay, now that you want to do that, like let's talk about ways. So I just think like on a first level kind of situation, I just want people to feel a little bit more connected to the land. And we're definitely strategizing some impact campaign activities coming up, like road shows to more rural places, and plugging into programming with the Japanese American pilgrimages. And I think that this film is going to be, and we've already been seeing how the film has been used by different communities to talk with each other. So I mean, if organizations can talk to each other and use our film to do it, that's such a great feeling to have, that we were the conduit of that.
What keeps you going in terms of filmmaking? What motivates you to keep at this?
Fame and fortune. I'm kidding. I think that, going back to like my idea book, um, I wish these stories were out there, because I think it helps people. So even like just watching films, just watching things from different people's perspectives really expands your mind. And if a film could be used to bring people together, or if it brings more understanding, or if it makes you feel more empathetic towards someone else. I think that's the real drive for me personally. And had I known what a civil rights lawyer does, like when I was 10, maybe I would have wanted to do that, because I think deep inside me, I always wanted, it's cheesy, but I always wanted to change the world. And I feel like maybe I would have been like an activist or a community organizer, but I think there's something about me just loving to tell stories and just really wanting to share cultures that lended itself to like filmmaking. And that's my tool that I want to use to connect people and to be a bridge between cultures, and to have a stepping stone in which you can talk about other people or even yourself and share big parts of who you are. I have a question for you that's less about filmmaking, but just in terms of your practice, because I know the answer, but I want everyone else to know the answer, is like, what are some things that you do as a practice to keep yourself grounded, and then also like your persimmon tree? It's like two questions.
Oh, that's fun. So I practice yoga very, it's funny because I told my class, my UCLA class the other day, there was something came up and I was like, oh, I practice Ashtanga yoga, which is really maybe, TMI, because it's like the most rigorous kind of like over the top yoga, because it's just like, but when I mentioned it, my TA was also a Ashtangi. So it was like, oh, and I said, it attracts a very particular personality. There are a lot of artists, sort of A-type personalities, because it is, kind of maybe the more rigorous style. But I feel like that practice has really helped me just get through a lot of things. It's just like it's a metaphor for you just got to keep at it every day. I mean, I don't practice every day. That's a little too much time, but I do that. And then I also practice Qigong, which I think, I do that with my classes there. I'm like, okay, let's all shake and just shake out all the bad juju. And they're like, ooh, what is this woman doing with us? It's kind of crazy. But I feel like, oh, half of making or doing anything is just getting over yourself, right? So I always tell them, okay, you just got to get over yourself. Let it go of like whatever you thought about who you were, or like this image you were trying to project. It's like, just get over it, because, it's like, you got to keep moving. And I think that's also just a really great metaphor for what life is, right? It's just like energy flowing, and it's just you got to keep moving. So there's that. And then the persimmon connection in our film has been like super, you know, important, because it's like my offering to everyone. The trees are so prolific. I have 2 persimmon trees. So it's like, okay, I'll just bring you some persimmons. And then but yeah, it's helped to broker interviews and open up contacts. So, I'm all about the persimmon. And right now we're enjoying the avocado toast because my mother's has an avocado tree. So we're happy about that.
Avocados. I'm waiting for mine.
Avocados. We got to get together and I'll bring you some avocados.
Yeah.
So I am curious. You produced like a lot of different projects, right? That are really pretty different. And how would you describe your workflow, or how do you stay on top of everything? Which is like such a great question for you right now, because you're juggling so many different things.
I'm doing 3 projects right now, and they're very different. I think it helps that they're very different, but I've come to, and this is something that I'm working with you on as well, Anne, and my career coach that I got from the Sundance Creative Producing Lab, which was great because I've struggled with this my entire life because I'm all over the place. And it's really hard to switch my brain like from, production producing, or like, post-production producing, to like impact producing, to like casting, like development. It's all like different stages of producing right now that I'm doing. And I I have just been basically like every Sunday night, I try to look at my week. And of course, it changes because there's calls and all these things, but I try to block out different days and like what I'm gonna focus on. And it's hard to do like 1 hour here, 1 hour there. So I try to do more than 2 hour chunks of each project. And I think that I just have to like be really diligent about keeping to that schedule. And also like just spreadsheets and calendars have taken over my life. And like I swear, like any friend that has known me in high school and college would be like, I cannot believe you're so married to your Excel sheets. And I'm like, I don't know how else to contain everything. And if my job is easier once everything is contained, I can feel free within those boundaries. That makes me feel more safe and productive. Like I feel more efficient. I know exactly what I need to get done, and I know I only have like a 3 hour chunk here. Then I'm gonna not be like fooling around or like, watering my plants or whatever. Like I'll try to, the one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to schedule in like breaks and like bathroom breaks and lunch. So there's certain days where I'm just like, oh my God, I haven't eaten for like 4 hours. So I'm starting to realize, okay, after 2 hours, it's good to have like at least when you're switching from project to project, to have like a good 10-minute break so that your brain can also rewire like, okay, now I have to think about development, or like now I'm thinking about impact. So then your mind is just like kind of fluidly moving versus like which is how I lived my life for a very long time. It's not good, not productive. And then it also creates a lot of anxiety and like just high tension and stress when I just needed to get 3 tasks done, and then I was just like thinking too much about all these other things. And then so I don't think I have any good uh advice except like get a good planner.
Well, I'm always very, very impressed by how efficient you are and how you can sort of get through a lot of different things. So,
Yeah, let's change gears. Imagine the scenario. It's a cozy evening at home. Would you rather watch a movie or listen to music, and what? Which ones?
so I was thinking about this and right now, because I've been working so much, I feel like my interests are more around what Seba would like to do, right? Because I feel like I should spend time with her. So, um, her interests are basically bugs, mushrooms, and animals. So,
So you go mushroom foraging?
so yeah, I was like, oh, we've got to watch that mushroom,
Yeah.
documentary. And then there's this other short film about these two entomologists that I missed the window on PBS when they had it streaming for free. But I was like, oh, it's a Redford Center backed film. So I was like, oh, I got to ask Melissa about that and see if we can get the film so we can watch it. But she's like, oh, they look so cute and the bugs are so beautiful. So it's like, oh, let's watch that. And then it's like, and just for like to relax, watching like pet animal cat videos on on YouTube. They're like jumping up and doing weird things. It's like doing a little bit of that. Nothing too taxing. But yes, I mean, I love music, but I feel like, oh, I do love watching a good film too. So anyway, um, what do you have? Like, I just put this out there. I am not into karaoke, but do you have a karaoke go-to song?
You know, my relationship with karaoke is very complicated. Um, so I don't know. I mean, I kind of know the American culture is more performative. It's like you go out on stage and then you sing and everybody like sings along, whatever. Growing up Korean American, I think it might be Koreans too, but like we use karaoke as like therapy. So we like I remember skipping school to go to the noraebangs in K-Town, and we would sing like these sad lonely songs about like unrequited love and like the boss being horrible, just like these like kind of more songs you sort of sing in your shower type of songs, but they weren't necessarily performative. They weren't like, oh, let's pick a song that everybody will want to sing along and dance to. So I've only started recently getting into like, oh, that's what karaoke's for. And then I would now get annoyed when like people sing songs that only they can sing, or it's like really depressing. Like we're all here in this karaoke room, like whether it's private or not, and you're like singing Creep. Like, okay, so I used to sing Creep, okay? But now I'm like, now like you just brought down the mood, and that is not a party song. So like I wish I had like a go-to party song. Like, okay, so Dave loves karaoke and he sings like, Miley Cyrus. He sings he likes Fergie songs and he likes Miley Cyrus. He likes like boy bands. Like he's really good about like these like fun poppy songs. And I just don't really listen to pop songs. So like my most poppy thing is I like Shakira. I've loved her before she crossed over. I love her Spanish songs a lot more, but again, I think it's more like the shower songs. So I sing like the Americanized Shakira songs, like Objection, Hips Don't Lie. So I don't know if it's like my go-to. I think it's more just like I sing it because I know it'll make people happy. So would you rather go karaokeing, go on a hike, or go to sleep?
So definitely karaoke, karaoke. It's like
Not.
that's the Japanese part of me. It's karaoke.
Yeah.
That's the last one.
Yeah.
So I would say go on a hike and then go to sleep. Definitely. I'm always up for sleeping, and hiking's always great. I like to go out. So see more bugs, right? More bugs and animals.
I started getting really into hiking. So what's your favorite trails that you don't really tell people? What's your secret spot?
Mm. Well, I mean, like right now, I feel like this. I always like. I have one of those, Southern California hiking books. So I like to try to mix it up. But the Santa Monica Mountains right now, because it's springtime, will just be amazing because it'll be green and the flowers will start to come up. And on a clear day, you can see the ocean. It's beautiful. I mean, we were this was right before the pandemic before the total shut. Oh no, actually it was right after the shutdown happened last year. So this was in March, and we went hiking in the Santa Monica Mountains, but it was this area that had been burned by the fire. I think it was the Woolsey fire.
Yeah.
And it was actually closed. And then my friend's car got broken into. It was kind of
I remember.
very, very, very disturbing because I felt like, oh my God, people are in weird panic mode. So I felt really bad about that. But the trail was beautiful because it had been you saw the forms of the burn. I mean, obviously it's not a good thing thinking about forest fires right now with climate change, but the images of these burned blackened trees against all of the greenness, it was beautiful. And I mean, I just also kind of a reminder of how kind of life keeps going and things rejuvenate and come back after fire. And I mean, fire is really a part of our environment, which is just that we think we need to control it, and it shouldn't happen, but it was beautiful. So
yeah, I didn't realize, like hiking is definitely a Western notion, but for me, like it is one of the best ways to really get to know the land or feel connected to it. Like when I think, like as you were mentioning these different places, I'm like, oh my God, am I an avid hiker? Like
yeah,
because I've hiked in all the places I've lived in. And I think it is one way to just like get up and go and like, really get a sense of like the flora and fauna of the place, and just feel like you can feel the dirt in your hands and in your shoes and just the wind and the bugs, like everything. Yeah.
so I know you're a super foodie. We could go on and on and on talking about food, but what's the dish that really makes you feel at home? Your favorite dish that you could eat over and over again. Maybe those might be two different things. I don't know.
It's the same thing for me. It's kimchi jjigae. It's this really simple kimchi soup. I only started recently making it with pork, but I might go back to the fish broth version because that's how my grandma used to make it. And it's just so simple. It's just like kimchi, some anchovies, and water. Boil it up, and I remember coming home from school every day. And I lived with my grandmother for 10 years, and she would make me these like bento boxes, which then wasn't so like, well received by my classmates, so I had asked her to switch over to like sandwiches. But I hated eating sandwiches. I just ate that because I didn't want to feel ashamed of my Korean food. So as soon as I got home from school at like 3:30, 4 o'clock, my grandmother would bring me a bowl of rice and kimchi jjigae. And it was just like, I'm home, this feeling of like, I'm home, right? And it's so easy to make. So I make it all the time. And my family does not eat kimchi, my husband nor my son. So
Oh,
I have like a jar of kimchi in the fridge and it's just for me. So like everyone knows it's like mommy special food. And when I travel and I come back to LA, yes, I will go and get the In and Out first. But once I get home, I'm having the kimchi jjigae. So it just always makes me feel like it's a reset. It makes me feel comforted and it makes me feel at home. It's probably going to be the last meal that I request if I know I'm dying, right? It's like that's probably going to be the thing that I want to eat. Um, it has a lot of meaning for me. And yeah, I think it's just like, it's not like a, fancy, like 4 course meal or whatever. It's something that you can do at home and you just need like 3 ingredients. Um, what about you, Anne? What dish feels like home to you?
it's funny because it's also soup. It's miso shiru, right? It's miso soup for me. It's just a different cultural thing. And I think, just a bowl of rice. I eat brown rice, so it's got to be brown rice, not white rice. And and some miso shiru, right? My daughter also, I have taught her to also feel the same way. So she's like, "Oh, miso shiru." It just, yeah, it kind of warms your inside and makes you feel like you're home. But I will say that the food of mountains are diverted when water becomes dust is the onigiri.
Yeah. I was like, I will go there with you if you bring that.
It's like, I always make it with chirimenjako, which are those little dried up fish that maybe people are a little freaked out by. And then, mix it with goma, or which is sesame seed, or shiso, and then always putting some umeboshi, the dried sour plum inside, and then wrap it up with some onori, the seaweed. But or sometimes with salmon also, but I've made so many of them. Every time we go up, that's like always our picnic food. And so I've shared it with several crews, and Kathy Bancroft was like, "Oh, I knew you would have that." I fed her many of those. So anyway, as well, so the onigiri and the persimmon would be our mascot foods for this film.
That's right. And yeah, it's definitely been like a treat. I'm like, ooh, is Anne gonna bring those?
So during this pandemic, during the last year, basically, what have you missed most?
Brunch.
No.
I will not skip a beat. Brunch. I miss brunch. I realize, I mean, yes, I am a foodie. I love food, but I love hanging out with friends over food and talking and connecting and having an adventure. I think that for me, like having brunch with friends in LA was like the pinnacle of my LA experience, right? It's like I dot my schedule with them to break up things that I have to do. It's just a way to reconnect with people over like an adventurous new place that you want to check out. Um, so I miss that a lot. I didn't realize like how much that was a part of my life until I didn't have it. And I was like, oh my God, brunch. What about you? What do you miss most in this time of pandemic slash shelter in place? What do you do for self-care?
Well, the self-care you guys already know, so I don't need to talk about that. But I just really miss hanging out with my friends, you know? I mean, sure, I've gone on a few walks with friends, but you know, to be able to embrace your friend and just hang out and eat and, you know, talk and shoot the shit, you know, it's just like that has not happened, you know, to be able to laugh in that way. I don't know, that just hasn't happened. And then it's like my friends who aren't here. It's like I can't travel. You know, I'm always looking to escape my house, the mess of my house. And it's like, oh my God, I'm here all the time. I just want to go. I mean, sure, I've taken some, you know, little road trips here and there, but nothing big. I mean, haven't, you know, I feel like I really had wanted to go see my aunt in Japan, and she's not doing well health wise. And I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, I hope I'm not going to miss seeing her, right? But yeah, you know, I love to travel. It's like part of my lifeblood, and I haven't been able to, you know, make some big trips that way. And you know, and it is, I will say with this film, it's a little sad to think that, you know, we're going to miss out on the opportunity of being in the presence of people and sharing film with people in different places. I mean, that's part of it. It's like, right, it's an excuse to go out and see people and
Yeah.
travel, but you know,
I mean, we still have like a pretty long run to do that until 2022. So
yes.
hopefully we'll get like at least a couple months in of being
Yeah.
able to travel with the film.
If you could describe me in one word, I guess now I'm not stern anymore,
You're
but
not stern. If you asked me in 2007, I'd be like stern.
ooh. So if you could describe me in one word, what would that word be? What word would you use?
Compassionate.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think that I think that like it's like it's different from empathy. It's like I think you are very understanding of different people's paths and situations and their stories, and you hold those experiences as valid for that person. I feel like with empathy, I feel like you're like in the person's shoes, which I think, you know, is a little different from being compassionate. I think you are able to see people for who they are. And yeah, I think that that's a that's something that we sorely miss in this industry. I think a lot of people are here for different reasons, and it's not always so great. But I mean, like, just like working with you, I feel like I can just be myself and I don't have to like prove to you how worth it I am. I don't know, maybe it's like our long history. But yeah, I feel like that. And then just the way you look at the world and the way you interact with people. Like you always, I feel like you give people a lot of grace. Um, you know, if people mess up, like you don't just like abandon them. So, which
Well,
I kind of
thank
do. It's like one strike, you're out. You're on my death list.
Aw,
I'm kidding. And it's
well,
just my
thank
Korean spirit,
you.
I guess.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I don't know. Hard to know who we are, but anyway, thank
Yeah.
you.
What is one word that you would use to describe me?
You know, oh, God, it's always so hard, this one thing, because I just feel like
Favorite film, one dish.
I know it's like many things, right? But I mean, you have been so supportive, but also, I mean, I really appreciate your you're always so energetic as well. So I think that the all over the placeness of you before has now been channeled in a much more like constructive way, and you're like, yeah, you've just been so supportive, and I feel like you're so supportive of everyone that you work with, and so you feel like it's a collaboration always. I think that, but also that you have a lot of energy to do a lot of things, and that you're able to get them done, and you keep, it keeps this engine moving. I mean, the fact that were able to make this film in the midst of this pandemic, I think is a pretty big feat. And I feel like we should, pat ourselves on the back.
Yeah, you too.
But, you know,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, you've been such an amazing, supportive collaborator.
Aw.
I
Yes.
no, I mean, it's like, and it's just like, yeah, and I feel like I could equally say compassionate about you. I feel like we share the same values, and so I feel like that's what's been so great about this partnership, is that I don't feel like I have to explain anything to
Yeah.
you about what, why we should do this or why something's important. So I mean, that is so hard to find.
Well, thank you
Thank
everyone
you.
for joining in and listening to our very intimate talk. Watch
Very
out for
long and intimate talk.
yeah.